So I had the schus to turn Shalom into an uncle from his previous status as the oldest son, bochur of my father. Now the three brothers, my father, and Bitzal and Shalom, are for the first time sitting side by side with their parents. As you probably know, that my namesake, Rabbi Simon, my grandfather, and my grandmother Freda passed away in Tafshin Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, respectively, at a young age. And the three brothers were there for each other. So I thought maybe to begin, I know a scene was just made, but there was always a Gemara that always is quite cryptic at the end of Masechta Me'ed Katan, which is a Masechta that talks about Avelis and Petira passing and mourning and grieving. There's a Gemara there right at the end that I looked through all the commentaries, all the Mefarshim. I never was able to understand it. Maybe there's someone here that can explain it. But thinking about Shalom's life, at least as I was privy and aware of it, I think maybe it could help us understand this cryptic Gemara. So then the Me'ed Katan, the Gemara says, I'll read it straight from inside. Exact Lashon. It says like this. Amar Rab Chanina. Chanina said, Kosher Yitzias Neshama min Haguf, that when a soul separates from a body, it's difficult. And what does he compare it to? Kitzipure mepia veshet, which Rashi teaches like a rope that goes through the hole in the rigging of a ship. So when you have a sailboat, the sails, which control the movement of the ship, require adjustment. So you have these ropes that go through these very tiny holes in the side of the ship. That's what Rab Chanina says. Rabbi Yechon Omar, Petirim mepi veshet. He says no. According to Rashi, he says like a rope that connects shekshurin shteis finis biyachad, that bind two ships together. Sometimes ships have to travel together. So how do you make sure that they are staying together? So you tie a rope between them. Like the example we would have is when you tow a car. That's the Gemara. What is the difference between Rab Chanina and Rabbi Yechon? Like, what are they? They're just two different mashalim. They both use a ship as an example. They both use a rope as an example. The question is it a rope that's causing the sails to be shifted so the ship can move, the sailboat or the sail can move, or is it a rope that connects two ships? So anyone that knew Shalom, both a relative as myself and all of us, family, colleagues, of course, I see quite a few here, knew that Shalom, his entire life, from the youngest age, I remember, and those that knew him even earlier always say, it was all around the Rebbe. Everything was the Rebbe. You mentioned it as well, Rabbi. And I know we hear these lines many times, people, the Rebbe, Skashas, the Rebbe, whole lives are the Rebbe. But there are some people that literally breathe 24/7. Now, I'm not going to psychologically analyze it. Is it because Shalom had nothing else? Didn't have immediate family besides his brothers? Or what I would like to suggest, that it came from good genes, It's an anicle of Gershon Ben Bahar, pretty good yichus. And he had a father, as I said, my namesake, was a Bal Mesiris Nefesh. And though he began his life as a Gruziner that only spoke Hebrew and Russian and Georgian, but then he became a chassid atomim in, we're not even clear exactly what year, but it seems like around Tofrei Shayin Ches in Rostov, should be the equivalent of 1917, 18. And then he was Zeicha to be one of those 10, the Christus Bris that the Frierdiker Rebbe made in Tafresh Pei Gimel, 1923, secret meeting with 9 Evrechim, that's how the Frierdiker Rebbe says it. We know very little about it, that they took an oath to the last drop of blood that they would do everything possible to preserve Yiddishkeit in Stalinist, communist Russia, Soviet Union. And that was not a small thing. It was Mesiras Nefesh Mamish. Anyone that would be caught would be shot on the spot, and many were. We don't even know who all the 10 were. The Rebbe once by Fabrengen, I believe, in Tov Shalom with Beis Tammuz, the Rebbe spoke about it, and I think he asked, maybe wrong with the year, but he asked if we know who it is, if anyone, but it was never really clear. The Rebbe himself was clear that the Rebbe was not, at least B'das Tachten, was not aware of exactly who they were. So my grandfather, Shalom's father, was one of them. We all know Hazerim Bedima, Berinu Yuktseidu, when you plant seeds with Mesiras Nefesh, it always will come back in the most powerful way. Every yichud, every mitzvah is a yichud nitzchi forever, but especially Mesiras Nefesh. So there's no question that my grandfather, Rabbi Simon's Mesiras Nefesh, resulted in the birth of his children and grandchildren. And we're talking about Shalom. So I have no doubt that Shalom's very blood was pumping with the same Mesiras Nefesh that his father had, except it took on a different shape once we came to America. It's not the Mesiras Nefesh, thank God, kipshute, but rather Mesiras Harotzen, a complete dedication. I mean, I don't know if there's a conversation I had with Shalom that in some way did not touch upon something about the Rebbe's work. I would love to sit and set hours with him. He would tell me the history. And as he, as a young bochur, got involved with the different people working on in Vaad L'hafotzas Sichos, even before it was official title of that. And it was just, you saw a complete, his whole life was that. Those that know, when my father passed away, the joke was, there was no fighting over any Yerusha, Gashmis that is. And with Shalom is probably even more so. So Gashmis and Kes and money really meant nothing to him. Just since I'm mentioning it already, Hashgacha Pratis, Shalom's dear wife, Fagel, shared with me today a letter dated Chayel Tavshin Chav Ches to Shalom from the Rebbe. So I want to read just the opening. It's a Michtav Klali Prati about the Chayel, but I think it's worth noting, talk about Ma'aser B'Pel, not just words. So let me just open the letter and read the actual Lashon. Here we go. So the letter is dated Yud Ches El Heit Tavshin Chav Ches, Brooklyn, New York. Ha'avrich Shalom Sheyichya. And then there's the form letter where the Rebbe sent to many people. The Rebbe says Shalom Avracha Ma'asher Hineni Kabbalas Michtave. And then it goes on to talk about Chayel, but the Rebbe adds these words in pen. After Michtave, he writes Piska, V'nidvas Liboy HaToher, Shetamad Le B'cholam Mitztarech Le. That's the Rebbe's personal addition to Shalom. So what's the story here? Shalom was not known to be a big veer that was sending the dovers to the Rebbe. So here's the story that I was told. Now, when Shalom was around 10 years old, he was in an accident. It's the first time I heard of this. I never heard it before. I don't know what kind of accident, but some accident. Anyway, he got an insurance of, I'm not sure how much money, but it was something significant if he had it those times. When he's 10 years old, you don't control your money. In Tavshin Chav Ches, he turned 21 years old. So the money was released to him. So he sent all the money to the Rebbe. That's what he did. I guess already defined his destiny after that. And I hear that the Rebbe sent one of the secretaries to Shalom and asked him if he was given the Leif Torah, the Leif Shalom. Shalom said, absolutely, yeah. And that's what the Rebbe writes. Piska v'nidvas libei hatoyer. Hatoyer is written heitof, heites rather, with a shtichel. And then shatamid le b'chol ha-mitztarech le. So little stories, and it's not a little story, but sometimes these small little events that most of us don't even pay attention to can capture the essence of a person. A bochur, Tavshin Chavches, what would have been his age? 21 years old, right? Born in Tavshin Zion. And no cheshbenis, he just sends all the money to the Rebbe. And he was a bochur, he'd be getting married a few years later. We know that the Rebbe at times people sent money to the Rebbe that were bochurim or money that was connected to their marriage or their l'chaim. The Rebbe sometimes told them to keep it because they have itzos. The Rebbe took it and acknowledged it in this way. I don't know if there's more apt way to capture nidvus libei hatoyer, because it wasn't just the money; it was the whole life that he gave. B'chol meidecha is b'chol mameincha, but it's also b'chol with everything, with your everything, with your all. And I remember seeing Shalom. I worked in the same building, the same floor. Zalman remembers the label and all those, the pedal. Shalom would stand there by the camera and working and the pasting with the letters. This was before computers. So you had to sit with what they call like a razor to fit the numbers in. And then if he made a mistake, the wax. I mean, it was quite a messy job. But he did it with a full dedication. It wasn't the gay bechlal, whether it was a menial labor, it was the Rebbe Sichos, and that's all that mattered. And we're coming to Yom Kippur, to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. They tell a story with the Baal Shem Tov, the chassidish way how to do al-chet. Al-chet is always very terrifying for many people. You start reading all those sins. So Baal Shem Tov is that's helping the Maisa. Baal Shem Tov once walked into shul in Kippur, and he hears the chazan, and the chazan is singing a melody, a very simchadik, like a simcha stated. He's wondering what you think Marakayan, there are sections in Kippur that are very simchadik. No, he listens closely, it's al-chet. So after davening, at some point, he went over to the chazan. As they did something in the mice, as you know, with the stories about Shem, upon him, definitely could have happened. I wasn't there, that's my point. I heard about it. So Baal Shem Tov said to him, you have very beautiful davening, but just can you tell me, by al-chet, that language says simcha. I mean, Kemuv the Baal Shem Tov must have imagined maybe he didn't know didn't know where he was. He just was reading. Mizinkt. And he said that in the Armen HaMelech, in the king's palace, there are many jobs to do. There are people who deal with the finance, people who deal with administration, people who deal with the taxes. He says, my job is to clean up. I clean up the palace of the king. So I take a broom and I'm cleaning the dust to make it a beautiful palace. So what greater simcha is then when I'm saying al-chet and cleaning up the dust to make the beautiful palace? Of course you dance, sing. Now, I'm not going to compare it. Shalom was not a sweeper, but the way he did the work, and on all levels, it was complete dedication, the fullest sense of the word. And without any fanfare, he didn't get any medals. Like if COL existed then, he probably would not have been featured. All the real people, if you want to know who's real, just see if they're never on COL, they're a candidate for Yishemes maybe. I include myself in the category, the other category, that is. And that's how we worked. I remember when he told me the story about Tavshin Chavtes. It was the summer. So in the summer, many of the chassidim and manichim, the people who worked in the Rebbe Sichos, would go away, America Shlichus or camp or wherever they were. And that Shabbos Chazain, Tavshin Chavtes, so Rabbi Yale, all of our Shalom, chazorah. They did some chazorah, but it was also one of those weeks where the Rebbe spoke about scientific events. It was the second time that they landed on the moon. So the Rebbe spoke about what everyone was talking about, life on other planets. A pretty rare topic. They don't hear every day. But no one did to write down the Sikha. And Sholom, who, if anyone knows him, was so nechal, so modest and capable of even feeling that he could write something with any achrayus. But he knew that also he didn't want the Sikha to get lost. So he ended up writing it. Rabbi Yel, I think, looked it over. And then because that Motzei Shabbos, Rabbi Weinberg, or maybe Rabbi Katz, I'm not sure who was, would learn Tanya on the radio, they would also chazer Sikha. So the Rebbe actually edited Sholom's Hanochim. There's edits on it, Hagos. I think they gave it out on one of the chudas, the family weddings. But when Sholom told it to me, he said to me, he didn't want anyone to see the Hanochim. He just wanted it to be preserved as that should be, because he was afraid of a vort. I could speak as a maniach. Yes, when you start writing, you're very careful. The mishchidim medaberes meter grene, every word that I've said from the highest places. But I remember Fabring and the Rebbe, in speaking, you speak like was heint is Yutas Kisel, let's say, or was heint is Chof Chayel. So when I wrote the Hanoch, the first time I wrote the word vos. Rabbi El says to me, in Shreim is the word vos. I said, but the Rebbe said it. It means it's Ashkinim Medaberes Meter Grene. Yeah, the Rebbe said it, but the Rebbe is going to cross it out, and he's going to be upset because maybe that may not even edit the Sikha if you give it in like. So I learned that Shekhinah Medaberes Meter Grene has different levels. There's the level B'dibur, and there's a level B'ksav. But Sholom, Mamish lived with that. Every time we talk, many talks I had with him about the Sikhas and who wrote which Sikha and all the Sikhas that were not written. Well, it was cool, Rebbe, in every possible way. I remember also as a kid, he was also my uncle, right? And he was in 770. As little kids, a bochur in 770, like it was a shem dover. So I would always be excited to invite Shalom to our house for Friday night dinner. My father would always say, "You do gay lad of mine. Mister almost organ name. You go." I was a kid, so I would go to him. Sometimes he came, sometimes he didn't come. It was like the biggest simcha because I thought that Sholom was actually a tzaddik nister. I'm not kidding. Actually, I thought he was a mekubal as well. Because as a kid, I remember in 770, he was always in the back with a group of few guys. I don't remember who they were. I think Label Shapiro may have been maybe some of the guys sitting here. And there was a boiler room in the back of 770. There was the boiler room. They were always sitting and whispering. And as a kid, you think, why are they whispering? They must be talking Kabbalah, because I always heard Kabbalah's secrets, the secret. The mind of a child. So I never wanted to ask Shalom because I'm sure he would have denied it, for many reasons, because it's not true. But so I just always thought he was a Mekubal. I'm not sure when I got over that fantasy, but
did you ever get over it?
Maybe not. Maybe it is. Maybe that would be good to find out. So this was Shalom, my uncle. Schlepped him to our house. And, the uncle I have a bunch of other uncles here. Vaad L'hafotzas, many healthy years. But as a kid, there's something about an uncle that you really appreciate. But going back, above all, exactly in the Rebbe's words, Vose libe hatev, atoyer. Actually, maybe it's hatev. You know what? Vose hetes. Now that I think of it, we have all the battles, the command battle. The partial leva toyer would be right, but it could be leva hatev. Now that I think of nidus libe hatev. Okay, we have what to discuss. Okay, so Azevi nun vav nun nach mit venoyim sinich bad venayle. Okay, So let me go back to the Gemara. Here's what my thought. It's completely b'derech efshar, and it's fine to have a different shot. In Tavshim Mem Zayin was Shabbos Pashas Ekev was Chafov. Shalom Jacobson is Chayav. His first child, even though his father would have been the name Simon, he named Levi Yitzchak because he was born on what day? I'm not sure. On Chafov. So Shalom chose to give a name to his child, the Rebbe's father, Chafov. So Chafov Tavshim Mem Zayin. It's not a Maimon HaMuzga, it's negated to the Gemara. You'll see in a minute. So the Rebbe spoke a very interesting sikha, among many sikhas, about the lesson from a ship, from a yacht, actually. But there's a little background. I want to share the background, which I actually found out later. I was able to prepare that on that it was Magid. A few months before that, a shliach in East Hampton, Rabbi Label Baumgarten, was planning in the summer to do like on a yacht. You go out on a boat, and you'd have his balabatim. It was like a stinkel fundraiser or whatever it was. And he wrote to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe wrote back to him with a question mark and a siman kriya, a question mark and an exclamation point. Hashayach leTeira mitzvahs. What's the connection to Teira mitzvahs? Going on a boat. So we were friendly. He called me up. I said, I remember the story after he reminded me. I didn't even remember the whole passage. And he said to me, he's a Kabbalah Selnik. It wasn't like he was Shalom going to argue with the Rebbe. He said to me, he just thinks that he made a mistake. He didn't really share with the Rebbe all the details. But on the other hand, his uncle Label Grona told him, what's the Rebbe affect Ashayla? Just means impossible, just cancel the whole thing and do it in a hall or do it somewhere. You know, the Rebbe is asking Shailas. But he feels Hedgish that he needs to explain to the Rebbe why he was his Havamim. So I said, so go explain to the Rebbe, why are you calling me? He wants me to write up something. So I said, first of all, I don't want to get involved between you and the Rebbe and your, the Rebbe can give us achelik, with all your explanations. And why should I? I wasn't part of the decision. I'm not on your board. So he said, no, you'll write something up. I know. Anyway, he begged me, Mamish. I said, okay, but you're signing it. I have nothing to do with this. And no name. I'm just doing you. If I'm just being your secretary, no problem. So I wrote up a note for him, which basically said that, first of all, with a big mechila right in the front, that if Lake Kivanti is ready, the whole thing will be called off and not even a shaila. It's not like he's challenging or questioning the Rebbe, but he feels mitzad Yisrael Nikim, whatever, to explain something like that. I don't remember the exact Shloshim. And the point that I wrote up was that Kemuv and Poshet, that the whole thing will be a pool of Teira mitzvahs. That'll be Teira Avedim Nils Chassidim. They'll learn something. They'll say Tilim, Daven Mincha, Ma'ariv, and give Zdokah. Like the Rebbe always insisted in all events. And why a boat? Because it's one of the ways that people today attract people. So it's like some people go to a dinner in a hotel, boat on the water. And then I just wrote as an agav, and Lahoyer that the Rebbe in Tavshim Mem Gimel Pesach actually spoke about the Hira from a boat. If you remember, he was the head, he was like the name from Morristown, Chase, David Chase. The Rebbe told the story by a Fabrengen how David Chase was on a boat on a yacht. And he asked the captain, which way is east? He daven mincha. The Rebbe spoke the Kiddush Hashem of that, but the Rebbe went further and had a whole Hira. What a boat is, a sfina, an aniyah, there's a Torah from the Baal Shem Tov on it. So I added in this settle to the Rebbe that also the boat itself can be used as a Hira and Avedis Hashem. Al Kaponim, the Rebbe did not answer the settle. That Shabbos, the Rebbe spoke a Sikha about it. And the Rebbe started the Sikha like this. As lessons Tzuku Manaya Veg in Hafotzas Atera Vayadins, and Torah mitzvahs. And when it spoke about the lesson from a boat, Yerdaniyas, that a boat I mean, it speaks about it in Kabbalah and Chassidus, that Yena, the boat is like a neshama beguf. So the boat represents the neshama Yiridus and neshama lamat. And it's in a big water, Mayim Rabim, stormy waters. But the boat represents, like it says about the Teva, Tevis Atera, Tevis Atfila, words, like Teva is also named for the ark. And the hero from a boat is the idea of that even when the neshama is lamata and take all these mayim seirim, all these raging flood waters, when you hold on to Torah, that's what you do. You ride through these waters. My morim also on Neach, Meineach, Mabul, Mayim Rabim. And the Rebbe, beautiful Sichos, the Rebbe's Magid, it's published in Sefer HaSichos, Tov Shemem Zayin, Ekev Chof of Tov Shemem Zayin. So, looking at this Gemara and looking at Sholom's life, here's the thought. It says, if you read this on a Sham Beguf compared to a boat, so it makes total sense that the Yitzias Neshama Min HaGuf is also part of the process, is the end of the journey in this world. So the Neshama came down into a boat. And then when the Eibishter decides that the Neshama should separate from the Guf, so it's Yitzias Neshama Min HaGuf, and Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yechanan have two ways to look at what is the pain or the loss. We know that it's not just Chabad L'Islam that we all have a loss when someone passes away, but it's also a loss because the Neshama came down for a tachlis. And the number of letters that Rebbe writes, so we don't just cry because we're sad, we also cry for the Eibishter. Because a Neshama, which is a Neshama Nitzchis, and only due to Chet Tzadas, that is the inyan of we don't have Chaim in Nitzchim. So it's all due to the halamas estatim and concealments in this world that we have death in the first place. So there's a tremendous tzar. And here's the two approaches. So Rabbi Yechanan says, Rabbi Chanina says that it's like it's put in b'piyah veshet, that the neshama comes into the guf, into this boat, and when it separates, just like we say, al korchech atachai, neshama doesn't want to come to this world. Why would it want to come to a corrupt, hostile world from Gan Eden, where they have all the giluyim and all the nanim zivashchina, and there's none of the nishenis and challenges of this world. But the Eibishter says, al korchech atachai, you have to go. But then the Mishnah continues, al korchech atames. So how does that stem? If the neshama doesn't want to come down, so it should be happy to leave. No, because once the neshama feels, as margish, the maila of doing Torah mitzvahs, yofer shah achas b'shuva ma'asim tevim be'elam hazeh, it realizes that even though it's not its natural habitat, neshama is always neir Hashem nishma sodom, always wants to go the maila. But this is the kavona. This is the tachlis kavona. So the neshama doesn't want to leave. That's why al korchech hatamez, the Eibishter has to compel it to do so. So according to one opinion, what is the issue here? It's the rope of the neshama that's tied through this hole in the boat. And the pain is because now they have to separate. And that's a painful thing, beruchnius and begashmius in every possible way. So what does Rabbi Yechanan come and say? That no, we're not talking about the rope that connects the neshama to the guf in the boat. We're talking about two boats. So here's my thought, at least. Shalom, as I said, his whole life was dedicated to the Rebbe. You know, we know a Rebbe, as it says in Tanya, Perek Beis, Reish Alfi Yisrael is a Reish Shama Klolis, that what gives us the strength and the kayach to make it through in our challenges, we have a neshama that is from a different place, completely different reality. And when we tie ourselves to that neshama, it's kashrus, literally the same word you use, kesher, is called a kesher, shel kayama, is a rope. As you tie yourself to the Rebbe, so that the Rebbe helps and carries us through our whatever things we have to go through life. So perhaps Rabbi Yechanan is coming to add that the even deeper pain is not just that the neshama and guf are separating, but it's also in some way the neshama is going back l'mayla, so taka it'll be together with all the neshamas l'mayla. But in the tachlis hakavon of the shlichus of being down below, it's not just your own shlichus, it's also fulfilling the Rebbe's inyanim. And maybe these are the two boats that are bound together. As I said, it's a svara, it's a thought of the yed and nisht. But the bottom line is for sure, the lesson is very clear. I think we always, achayit nelibe, the Rebbe always emphasized. Remember the year Tavshim Memches, who could forget? Mamish every fabrengen, v'achayit nelibe. I mean, it was not, we can't speak about the Rebbe's personality, but the Rebbe as a private, discreet person. I was a kid, I don't really remember, but in Tavshin Chofhei, you didn't see the Rebbe so naif and beilit. Tavshin Memches, everything changed. The Rebbe moved the whole operation to his house, daven 3 times a day. Everything changed after Pesach that year. The Rebbe stopped Maimorim, Rashi Sichos, Zohar, Pirkei Avos, Rambam, all the things that Rebbe himself initiated. So we don't understand the Rebbe's inyanim and why the Rebbe did it, but it was very clear that the Rebbe was making it as begoli as possible. It was not like concealed. I always wondered, it's also painful to see at times. So I remember by the Shloshim of the Rebbe, it was Pasha Porah. Pasha Kisis was Pasha Porah, it was Shloshim 30 days after Chabad. So the Rebbe spoke about the Pasha Porah is the Pasha Porah Aduma, Tumas Mes, and the Tara of Tumas Mes. The Rebbe brought the Medrash, famous Medrash. Why does it say Zeus Chukas Atera, Zeus Marabetz Boy V'Emer Zeh? Because the Eibishter showed Moshe all the Tumas, Tumas Zov, Tumas Metzera, Tumas Nida, the different impurities, and then showed him this is how you retire from each one of them. Then it came to Tumas Mes. Tumas Mes, Niskarkim upon Moshe. Moshe's face became ashen, white, green, yellow, different enforcing what it means. But bottom line, he was disturbed. Bameh tehei tarose. How will we find Tara? How could you be metired from Tumas Mes? I remember, I'm sure others remember, and the Rebbe was like with his pilot was saying, Moshe Rabbeinu, was Chochmah Datzilus. He knows that the Eibishter can bring Tara. If he brings Tumah, he could bring Tara. So what's the, suddenly he's disturbed? You can find Tara for other Tumas. You find a Tara for Tumas Mes. Skarkim upon him. Then the Rebbe said, Moshe gekent Chassidus, and you know the Neshama is Nitzchi, when you read the Tzerech Aliyah, and all the Biyurim was ein da. He was a person who understood the Aliyah. I mean, it was clear that Rebbe was speaking about himself. So what's bothering him so much? And that's what the Eibishter says. He showed him, this is how. But what bothered Moshe so much? I don't remember the exact Shloshim, but the Teichem was for sure something like this. That when, no matter how much a seichel aliki, a chochmah v'atzilus understands something, but when it comes to the tsar of the heart, the emotional pain of the purity, the neshama beguf, even l'rega cotton, even for 1 second, which by atam adveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem chaim kulchem hayim, even 1 second that dveikus is concealed, doesn't matter how much he understands with the seichel. Basically, I'm paraphrasing that the most brilliant mind cannot speak to a broken heart, to a bleeding heart. So the Rebbe more or less said. I remember very vividly this Fabrengen, because what I was wondering why the Rebbe is sharing this with us. It's one thing that Rebbe feels that way. Understandable, he has to share it with us. I never really got a real answer. Like, why would the Rebbe want to tell us this? So the only hasbara I got was when Shalom's oldest brother, my father, passed away 16 years ago in Tavshin Samachei. When I sat Shiva, I remember these sichos. These are the sichos that gave me strength. That maybe the Rebbe, just like it says about why the Eibishter appeared in a sneh, in a thorn bush to Moshe Rabbeinu. Why in a sneh couldn't appear in a beautiful apple tree? Because it says in Medrash, because he wanted to show Moshe that I feel in a sneh, that even in the darkest of darkness, a tree that doesn't bear fruit, and so on, that even when the Yidden are in Mitzrayim and all the suffering that they're going through, I'm with them. He's basically preempting the question. You're sending me to save the Jews. Why are you not with them? So perhaps in that year Memches, the Rebbe was showing us that I'm a Rebbe Taka and all the milas, but the mile of a Rebbe is not just that he's in Shamayim and he's in Ruchnis Dika worlds. He's with us here Lamat. If it says Shchinta Begalusa, then the Rebbe is also with us in our pain. And maybe that was a way of giving chizuk. That's how I understood it, at least personally. And Taka gave me chizuk. So I say it now as we're in the Shloshim of Shalom. I heard a story when I was a younger bochur, Rabbi Shmuel, the same Rabbi Shmuel of Yidden, who was also a relative, an uncle, great uncle of Shalom. The family, Shalom's grandmother was Dvoira Hoda. She was a Levitin. She was a sister of Rabbi Shmuel. She married Achmiel Chodosh. They had Freda, who was our grandmother, and Shalom is a child of Freda and Simmons. Yeah. So it was the time of the Tzemach Tzedek. So the stalkus of the Rebbe Chaim Mushka, the Tzemach Tzedek, was also 5 years before Tzemach Tzedek's stalkus was Tafresh Chavov. I believe she passed away Tafresh Chav Aleph. And all the other Rabbeim, it was the other way around. The Rabbeim survived the Rebbetzins. The Rebbetzins survived the Rabbeim. So we know that the Tzemach Tzedek went into some type of seclusion after the stalkus of his Rebbetzin. No Maimorim, no Yechidus. I don't know the details, but it was not a happy time. There's a letter from the Rebbe Bar that they came to Tzemach Tzedek and tried to be made that Tzemach Tzedek should come back, so to speak, and re-engage with the chassidim. And they said the Tzemach Tzedek answered, "Ein melech b'lei matrinis." A king is not a king without a queen. So the Talmid Chacham among them right away brought the rayas. The Torah is a malk. And Tzemach Tzedek did not necessarily accept it. But then the day came. Again, I don't know how long it was, and the word went out that the Tzemach Tzedek is going to say, "Amayim chassidim." This was after a while when he didn't. So you can imagine the simcha b'chassidim. Everyone came running. Tzemach Tzedek is going to say, "Amayim." And Rabbi Hillel Paritcher, who was already older chassid by then, because he would pass away in Tafresh Chav Dalet. He was in Paritcher at the time, I assume. So he came also to Lubavitch, by him, Amayim Chassidus from the Rebbe. So he was here. Anyway, they were waiting, I guess, in the outer cheder for the Tzemach Tzedek to come out to say the Maimed. And half hour passed, 45 minutes. Tzemach Tzedek didn't come out. Rabbi Hill was not able to stand there. He was like, he had to go out. He's not feeling well. As he's walking out, he hears two younger lights speaking to each other, and they said something that disturbed him. They were talking about the Tzemach Tzedek, not I don't know the exact loshon that they used, but it was not the way you should speak about a Rebbe. So he got all Israkshus, he got back his keiches. He went over to the two younger light, and this is exactly how I heard the story. And he said to them, I'll say it in Yiddish and then I'll translate. He said to them, at least the words that I could translate. He says to them, Schwenzelach, Schwenzelach, Schwenzelach. Was meint ihr? A Rebbe is eigen anoz mit amoil. A Rebbe is alakus. B'shas do helam af alakus, do helam af Rebbe. He said to them, how do we translate Schwenzelach? Okay, we can translate it moderately or a little more. Everyone can interpret. It basically means simply idiots, but it could be much worse than that. Beryl, willst du geben a Tirgum? Huh? Anyway, he said it 3 times. He says, what do you think? A Rebbe is eyes, a nose, and a mouth. A Rebbe is godliness, elikus. And when there's a concealment on elikus, there's a concealment on the Rebbe. I mean, it's a dover posh at anyone that knows what a Rebbe, at least even ostensibly what knows what a Rebbe is. So we're living now after Gimel Tammuz. It's 27 years. There's a Helam on elikus. There's a Helam on the Rebbe. That's undeniable. Everybody agrees with that. After that, maybe nobody agrees exactly how it manifests, but But upon that, I don't think anyone disagrees with. Looking at Shalom, and I saw Shalom, I saw my father. They're made of the same blood, just different places. My father was a journalist; he was out there. Bezalel was completely concealed, and Shalom was also pretty much undercover. But they have very similar genes. I know it may sound surprising, but those that knew them, what really mattered. What really mattered was my father, and I'm not here to talk about my father, but just the same personality. He came to fight a war for the Rebbe's covered, whether it was with this group or that group. There's not even a suffix. It wasn't like, I have to weigh pros and cons and see how much money I'm going to lose, or what kind of bushes or what kind of challenges. I remember the pride that Shalom had when my father fought those wars. I can't tell you. He had such simcha for me. Because it was his brother, his older brother, but it was coming from the same place. And I saw, when you look at these people, sometimes these things are really meant not to be spoken about. But I saw it in my father, I saw it in Shalom, Bezalel also, though I didn't really see him that often. But the pain that they had of this Helam of Elikus, of Gimel Tammuz, were not spoken about. They didn't have to sit and cry by Fabringens and say, what do we use? It was much deeper than that. It was appreciating and understanding something like we're talking about here, that there's a much deeper thing going on here. It's not just I missed the Rebbe. It's the whole essence of a chassid's life, the whole essence of our purpose. When there's a helam on that, it's not just a small matter. It's like challenges the very, and not chas v'sholom challenging an amunah. It's just a challenge on the whole tachlis and everything that you breathe and you live with. And Shalom breathed and lived the Rebbe all the time. So interestingly, and with this I will conclude, the Gemara continues. The Gemara, sometimes you understand a Gemara by looking what's the next Gemara, what comes afterwards. So it continues and it talks about the difference when hanifter min ames lo yemer lech l'shalom, you say lech b'shalom. So we're talking about Shalom. His name is Shalom. And the reason is, in simple English, that when you speak to someone who's alive, you say, go to peace, go toward peace. And if someone who's passing on, you say, go in peace. In other words, your travel should be a peaceful one. And the Gemara elaborates with Makedis and so on. Then it concludes after that, Kol ha'yetzim v'es ha'knesses lebeis ha'medrash, v'es ha'knesses, zeichel mekabel pnei shchina, it says yelchem achayel el choyel. And of course, the famous ending, Talmidei Chachomim ein le menucha afil le'elam haba, shenemar yelchem achayel el choyel, el kim epitzin. So, Shalom's name is mentioned here in this Gemara. We would have liked it should have been Lishalom and not Bishalom, but still Shalom is the name also of the Eibishter. So I want to say, there's no question the Neshama is here with us, especially with the family and the friends and all of us here. Takeaway message is that the Rebbe Marash was nostalgic, Yud Gimel Tishrei, Tafresh Mem Gimel. So, but there were no social media, there were no emails and WhatsApps. So it took time till the news got out there. It was right before Sukkot. So the news arrived in Chernigov on Shana Rabbah that the Rebbe Marash was nostalgic. The Rav there was Radatz, the Rav David Tzvi Chen. Someone came over to him by a kofus that night, first night, Leil Shemini Atzeres. The Rebbe is avek. So he fainted, kipshutei mamish, and they couldn't revive him. The mamish couldn't revive him, so it was like a sakon. He's lying there, couldn't do anything. So they went to his father's house, a Peretzchen. He was an older man already. They say he's the only one that saw 6 Labbeim. The Alter Rebbe, when he was before his Stalkus, he was a young baby. And the Frierdiker Rebbe he saw when the Frierdiker Rebbe was a young child. So they called up, they took him to the shul because they thought maybe he could find a way to revive his son. Anyway, he bent down and he whispered to his son, Rab David Rabdatz. He said to him, "A Rebbe geht kemel nishtavek." A Rebbe never leaves. So whether it's Bishalom or Lishalom, the Nitzchis remains. Just a question of what form it takes. So standing here and honoring Shalom, who, as I said, to me was embodied and personified this Rebbe through and through. I'm sure from his youngest age, and I didn't really know him, but definitely you saw later. The Nidus Libei HaToher, or HaTev, or any other meaning that the test has, that we can learn from that type of connection. And it was without any ears. Shalom completely not shaykh to Yidden of COVID, not looked for it, didn't seek it. But I can tell you, as a Jacobson knows of Jacobson, he had plenty of self-esteem. It was not a scoop in the dresses. It was not a pushover. But he didn't take it himself seriously. He took the cause seriously. He took the Rebbe seriously. And his life was completely around that. And though today you don't usually value, many people in the superficial world don't value real pnimistika and emes chassidim like that. We caught up with the sizzle. There's more than the steak, the glamour, the glitz, the fireworks. And sometimes it has an inyan, but to appreciate people like Shalom, really have to look into that inner place. Chitzenis didn't matter. It was completely the Rebbe, and you see it in his children, their skashus. So we take that lesson for each one of us. The Rebbe came avek and lives on through us. And Adarabba, we have the responsibility to be the arms and legs and the mouthpiece to continue the Rebbe's message to everyone we can reach. Until the day, which should be bochur, even tonight, Chayel should be united with the Rebbe and with the Rebbe's chassidim, Shalom, and all the others. The Gula Amitis Vashlema, Niske Zenzach, Rebbe Dalmata, Masar Fochim, the Lashon of the Rebbe himself.